a historian, it's probably no big surprise that one of my favorite genres is historical fiction. Not only do I fantasize about the nerdy research that goes into historical fiction, but I appreciate the way the writers of this genre expose me to new ideas that I can potentially explore in nonfiction. If you also enjoy a nice or not so nice trip to the past, you may enjoy one of these 4 books, whether you like good historical horror or literary realism. In this video, by the way, there are mild spoilers, but I don't tell you everything. So let's get this new series rolling. Before we dive into this video, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor, Scentbird. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service that seeks to empower people and help people express themselves through scent. With Scentbird, you get to pick out a new designer fragrance every month, so you can try out fragrances before committing to a full-size bottle, because that can cost like $150 to $500, and what if it stinks? But not with Scentbird, baby. You get to test out things before you buy a big bottle. The reason I'm excited about this sponsorship is because scent is something I think about often when studying history and when I'm reading a book. The smells of the era I'm studying, the smell of book pages, the scents so carefully curated to best illustrate the setting of various novels. A good novel is layered and perfectly curated like a good scent. Plus, I don't know about you, but taking a hot shower or a bath, dousing myself in perfume, and lighting a candle before reading a book is always a good time. That's self-care. Plus, scent triggers memories and can take you back to a good experience or a book in an instant. So I'm really excited that Scentbird was kind enough to send me 5 huge vials of luxury perfume. And this month, I got some really good stuff. All of these smell great, but let me tell you about my favorites. That Versace Bright Crystal Absolo, this one, oh my God. This one smells so juicy. This smells juicy. I'm trying to go out and dance on somebody's son in this. This right here, this one has peony, raspberry, yuzu, pomegranate, and it's got a little nice sexy layer of musk added on top. This one is my favorite. This one is the one I'm gonna have to order a full-size bottle of. This one is called Confessions of a Rebel, Bitch Please. The name is perfect, but also the scent is perfect. Black currant, jasmine, sandalwood, and skin musk. I'm spraying this one on myself while I film this video, so that's what it smells like in here. It smells absolutely delicious. Last but not least, my other favorite in this box is DKNY Be Delicious. This one smells like apples, and it smells so good. Because there's so many good books and fragrances to try, let me give you the reads and Scentbird will send you the fragrances. Use my coupon code INTELLECTUAL for 55% off at Scentbird. It's just a little over $7 for your first month and available in the USA and Canada. Be sure to check the link in my description box below for more info. Damn, it smells good in here. Now about those books. Growing up, one of my earliest historical obsessions was the Titanic, and I read this reference guide from cover to cover as a kid repeatedly. I saw the movie a million times, and it's still in my top 10 favorites of all time. So I was super excited to see all of the details come to life in this horror historical fiction novel. A young woman with a shadowy past named Annie becomes a first-class stewardess on the ill-fated maiden voyage of the Titanic, and a bunch of creepy shit goes down. There's a mystery, drug addiction, occultism, romance, and scares. The book was inspired when author Alma Katsu watched a documentary on the sinking of Titanic's sister ship, the Britannica, and learned that a woman survived both. Okay, not to sound like a nerd or anything, but I squealed with glee when Annie noted 1,000 books in the first-class library, a swimming pool, 1 shilling a visit. That's the kind of stuff I remember from my reference guide, and there were just so many things a Titanic head will appreciate. Here, women walked in pairs and threesomes along the promenade in their smart dresses, most with the fur stole wrapped around their shoulders to keep off the chill. You could see the lounge through the windows, the veranda cafe made up with a tropical motif, wicker tables and chairs, groups sitting together drinking their after-dinner coffee or playing cards. I'd reread passages and close my eyes, imagining what it was like. And the abundance of statistics helped illustrate the sights and the smells of a luxury cruise liner in 1912. There were 8,000 cigars available for the first-class male passengers' enjoyment, a steward had told told Carolyn proudly, as though she cared. It smelled as though all 8,000 were being smoked tonight. Not in here. It smells like Confessions of a Rebel, bitch please. Thanks, Scentbird. It smelled a little better later in the novel with the smell of perfume and pomades, roses and flower arrangements, shrimp and lobster and champagne sauce, good prime rib. Because everyone knows the inevitable fate of the Titanic, there's a continual buildup of anxiety as the novel continues. All of the fancy trappings and the post-travel plans of characters will soon evaporate, but you keep reading. You want to know who makes it and who doesn't. I absolutely love the creative writing that made notable millionaires like Madeline Astor and Benjamin Guggenheim, lingerie designer Lady Duff Gordon, and the journalist and anti-child exploitation crusader W.T. Stead more like real people. Stead was a huge figure in British history, whose investigative reporting of child sex abuse victims had led to the age of sexual consent being raised from 13 to 16. I love how Katsu wove him into the story, especially by way of his very annoying breakfast order to Annie on page 51. He gave her his preferences for breakfast: oats cooked in cream, 2 duck eggs, quail if duck was unavailable, chicken eggs only as a last resort, soft boiled, all to be delivered to his door no later than 5:30 a.m. And that guy was just one of our protagonist's 12 cabins to look after. Working aboard a ship seems like a horrible occupation if you ask me, and yes, I've watched Below Deck on Bravo, but it was even worse before cell phones and other forms of modern entertainment. But early 20th century stewards still had their fun, best illustrated by Annie's description of the staff after hours. Women as well as men wandering from cabin to cabin with a bottle of stout or whiskey, looking for drinking companions, card games, and dicing in the alleyway. Men whispered temptations in your ear when they thought they could get away with it. In addition to settings sampling a British asylum and even Queenstown, Ireland, on board the ship we get to see through the eyes of steerage characters as well as first class. One of my favorite parts is when a clique of super wealthy souls has a seance in the middle of the sea. And this is cool because interest in occultism had been on the rise in wealthy circles since the mid-19th century, so this made the story juicier. This 417-page book leaves the reader pondering over the events. Was there something supernatural happening? Or is this all the result of the power of superstition and/or untreated mental illness? How about you read and come to that conclusion for yourself? Food is my favorite kind of imagery in literature, so it was obvious to me when planning this series that we'd keep track of gourmand delights. A quick word about the deliciousness rating system. 1 is food is not mentioned at all, and 10 is food is mentioned with opulent imagery and adoration, a la George R.R. Martin describing feasts in the Game of Thrones series. But we can't all be George R.R. Martin, can we? I'll consider if the novel includes foods I've never heard of, as well as the importance of food in the story itself. In the deep, there were fleeting references to food, but very little description. I feel like a lot more could have been incorporated, especially because I have the menus in the reference guide. There's a whole portion where a poor character dines with wealthy ones at the dinner table, but makes no mention of the food. It was disappointing, but there were some good sentences here and there that prompted Google searches. All the first-class passenger servants were being treated to a special meal: eels in aspic and pigeon pie. Eel and aspic are jellied eels, or eels boiled and cooled in a spice stock. I'm good on that, you can keep that over there. And pigeon pie is a savory pie made with pigeon. You know, I'll try it. Maybe, no, I think I'm good on it. And finally, on page 225, the plate in the center was scraped bare, though by the looks of it, they dined on caviar and scrambled eggs. Streaks of cream obscured the blue decoration on the china. Despite the name, this book by Bernice McFadden does not sugarcoat the lifestyle and ostracization of a full-service sex worker in Jim Crow America. It doesn't tone down the abuse, the colorism, or the mental health issues of everyone reared in the Bible Belt. It's a literary gem that follows the friendship of Pearl, a woman whose child was murdered, and a sex worker named Sugar Lacey, who has come to Bigelow, Arkansas, and become the subject of much gossip and scorn. Pearl and her husband Joe have not had sex since their daughter was murdered, and the older woman gravitates towards Sugar in a way that alarms the judgmental townspeople around her. You got the whore of Babylon right next door, and you call her friend. The word friend came out slick as blood, running around town with her like y'all was cut from the same cloth. Sugar is a sympathetic and complex character who grew up in a brothel with little companionship. The following passages show the environment she grew up in and how it made her who the person she is. Sugar spent 15 years in Short Junction. Her friends were the wind, sun, and trees, her playhouse, the woods, and the river that flowed through it. Friday and Saturday nights found men and women from all over the county sitting in and around the Lacey home, where the good times rolled as long as you had the money to keep it going. They came for the conversation, corn liquor, catfish, and Lacey pussy. When Sugar arrives in town and begins taking new clients, the women are predictably more upset with her than with their men. One of my favorite passages is from page 156 to 157, when it's revealed why various women want Sugar, who has become a bit influential, to leave. Faylene wanted Sugar gone. At least 6 of her customers had started wearing wigs they'd ordered from the back of a movie star magazine. Sugar was taking food out of her mouth. Those women no longer needed to come in every week for a wash and press. To make it worse, Sugar had also taken a man out of her bed. Cyrus Green wasn't a man of substance or good looks, but he had shared her bed twice a week for the past 10 years. Because the book takes place in the Bible Belt in the 1940s and 50s, the church and gospel music are central to the richness of the story. The battle between surviving by any means necessary and being a righteous follower of God has been omnipresent for many religious Black Americans, especially those living when the novel takes place. Life was 100 times harder for Black people back then than it is today. No matter what, nothing is change-minded people insist. The church was a sanctuary from physical labor toil, financial woes, and loneliness. It's significant when Sugar is swept up in the rapture of gospel music at church on page 163, because it's a moment for the supremely sad and lonely Sugar to feel a part of something bigger. Sugar was swept up in the music, had forgotten about the staring, hateful eyes of the Bigelow women, and they had momentarily forgot about her. People jumped and danced down the aisles, calling out to the Lord. Some fainted, while others bent over and wept. But sexuality and Christianity aren't the only things explored in Sugar. There's a juke joint, food, and misogyny, the main kind and the internalized kind. It's not surprising to read about the hypocrisies of the town people, but it is satisfying. I remember rereading certain passages so I could chuckle and marvel at how closely it mirrors real life. My favorite thing in this book is the relationship between Pearl and Sugar and the drastic transformation of Pearl's life. For instance, though Pearl thinks being naked in her own home is downright disgusting, by the end of the novel she emulates Sugar's carefree nudity and is surprised at the results. When she dyes her hair, her friends even accuse Sugar of turning Pearl into a sex worker like herself. Pearl's character was stretched, tugged, and pulled until her name only left grainy particles of soil on the tongue of anyone who spoke it. She had become, in the eyes of the most influential women of Bigelow, nothing more than dirt. For me personally, this took me back to being in high school and being called a hoe. And I had a friend who I thought was my best friend, and one day she passed me a note in the middle of Spanish class and said, "We can't be friends anymore because you're a hoe and people will think I'm a hoe." But moving past my personal traumas, this 229-page book is a relatively quick read that will really tug on your heartstrings, make you laugh, and also contemplate the lived experiences of your ancestors. And then the sequel, This Bitter Earth, provides more backstory for characters that you'll come to appreciate, if not love. The first book is definitely the stronger entry, but the second one is still good. So the deliciousness rating on this series is a 10 out of 10. Food is beyond important in this book. Pearl offers Sugar a freshly baked sweet potato pie when she visits her home for the first time on page 40. And when Pearl has her first ever hangover at 60 years old, Sugar arrives on page 135 with 2 barbecue rib dinners complete with cornbread and potato salad and Coca-Cola. While Sugar reveals her painful past to Pearl in Painful Slivers on page 166, Pearl teaches her how to bake, like a lemon pound cake that may ruin Sugar's figure, making her reflect that life suddenly meant more to her than a small waist and perfectly shaped hips. And Sugar, being the good friend that she is, also teaches Pearl, with the help of a large ripe cucumber, the technique of giving hand and giving head. That's a good friend. Before Joe and Pearl have sex for the first time in 15 years, which is a really important moment, he helps her cook, mixing eggs for scrambling, bending over and looking in the refrigerator to check for slab bacon. And when Sugar returns home to the Lacey brothel, her aged caregiver's retirement from sex work is illustrated by the following line on page 118. Their famous fried fish and potato salad was now served at church functions and sold at Friday night bingo games. Last but not least, at an important dinner on page 187, the diners gorge themselves on sweet sausage dressing, collard greens, potato salad, macaroni salad, chitlins, candied yams, and roasted potatoes. A turkey, baked to golden perfection, set beside a glazed ham adorned with bright cherries. Can you smell all that? I can. Tayari Tayari Jones's Leaving Atlanta is a very quick read that sucked me in pretty much immediately. Seriously, I sat down to read the first sentence on the first page, and before I knew it, I had read the whole book in one sitting. It's that good. Tayari was a child at the time of the Atlanta child murders, and in this set of 3 short stories, she explores how scary it was. The decision to go from third person to second person to first person perspectives shook me, and it increased the suspense. It made the weight of the events more pressing. And from the night of the living dead to interactions with guardian angels, patrolmen, to commentary on Maynard Jackson, Atlanta's first black mayor, the historical references are abundant, perfectly painting a tapestry of 1979 to 1980 Atlanta. More than anything, this book made me cry, especially when I was put in the shoes of a child who is from a good middle-class family and is so deeply unhappy that he makes a final decision that leaves the reader clutching the book, or in my case, throwing it. His name is Rodney Green, and his mother is obsessed with their respectable middle-class black status, and his father is abusive. Father will beat you tonight. The tiny column of letters facing your report card mandates that he will pull his belt from its loops and swing hard. His pants will fall below his waist, revealing clean white undershorts as he swings at your shins, forcing you to dance a humiliating jig. The first point of view involved Latasha Baxter, a girl whose parents are separating, and the third deals with Octavia Fuller, the poor child of a single mother who faces ridicule and colorism. One of my favorite aspects of the book is the way that Tayari Jones, who went to school with some of the victims, inserted herself into the scenes humorously. Why doesn't she just ask you how old you are and move on? Tayari Jones, 2 aisles over, is sniffing rubber cement and could use a little adult supervision. I read this book in one entire sitting, and I'm pretty sure you could too. You care for the kids at the center of these stories, as well as the real life victims. The book is sad, but also funny and at times hopeful. I'm glad I read it. This book gets a 7.5 out of 10 on the deliciousness rating. Food is important in this story because each main character has an important detail that is described and reflects their situation. Also, in every section, speculation over the killer of Atlanta's many murdered children happens at the dinner table, though Octavia eats cheese and crackers as a snack at her table. She also speculates that kidnappers might be giving children Big Macs and strawberry shakes to keep them from hollering and running. When Latasha Baxter's father moves out and her mother tries to comfort her, she's giving the indulgent cheese dream, described on page 17 as grilled cheese sandwiches made with French toast and smothered in raspberry syrup. In the case of Rodney Green, it is emphasized that his status-obsessed mother is a terrible cook who is unaware of her culinary limitations and misprepares complex dishes without remorse. He, who is middle class, has this terrible food in abundance, noting that in the mornings he usually wakes up to the smell of too crispy bacon and scorched eggs. To illustrate how overlooked he feels, there's a scene where Octavia is given a large portion of chili mac, generously topped with gooey cheddar by the lunch lady. But on Rodney's portion, your plate is served with an austere scoop of reddish casserole, cheeseless. You look at the woman with a face full of hurt, but she ignores you. Octavia pays for her reduced lunch with a dime. Rodney pays the full 40 cents. Later, Octavia describes the embarrassment of her situation thusly. I scooped a chunk of grape jelly out of a little container. I stirred it into my grits and got ready to choke it down. Nobody ever died from eating stiff grits, but hunger hurts and a growling stomach is embarrassing. Therefore, we the reader know it's a significant moment when her mother takes her out to the pricey Red Lobster, where Octavia tenderly describes eating her shrimp and French fry meal. 1950s through 1960s Georgia is the backdrop of this illuminating and poignant 387-page novel by Delores Phillips, following 13-year-old Tangi May. Tangi has 9 brothers and sisters, 8 of whom all share a teeny shack with their abusive mother, Roselle. They sleep on the floor, and each of the siblings has a tense and toxic relationship with Roselle, who is a sex worker and does not want her children to leave her. Though the synopsis on the back of the novel mentions Tangi May being selected to join the first integrated class at a nearby white high school, the story is much deeper and wider than that. It's more of a family drama filled with multiple vignettes as we follow our protagonist through a pivotal time in her youth. And it's rich, child. Rich with characters and development, rich with imagery, and rich with historical details. You remember how I said a good novel is layered like a good scent? The realism means there's a bunch of hardship and sadness. It's a raw read and not pleasant all the time. The GA version of the N-word isn't used, but the ER version is. The ableism towards deaf and mute Martha Jean, Tangi's sister, is hard to swallow. In the background is the integration of the local school, which brings violence and hysteria in the county. This isn't a book that seeks to tell the past as the way it could have been in an idealistic world. The characters are the imperfect beings that our ancestors truly were, not the idealized version we tout purely as survivors of racism. Roselle sends Tangi's older sisters, including Tarabelle, to the town brothel when times are especially rough. There of course is no one for black children to go to and ask for help and support. And Roselle is not only physically and emotionally abusive and predatory, but a terrible head of house. My mother's expenses were mounting. I would see her sometimes scraping pennies and nickels together to buy batteries for her radio, or cigarettes, or gasoline for her car. She paid the insurance man, the coal man, the ice man, and Mr. Poppy. When Harvey gave her money, she would buy food or something nice for herself. Meanwhile, Tangi and the other children are embarrassed at their poverty, made worse by their mother's irresponsibility and selfishness. Once again, the 5th grade had chosen the Quinns as their needy family. Tomorrow, our principal would deliver 12 boxes to 12 needy families. It thrilled our mother almost as much as it embarrassed us. Mama, who was not one for other holidays, looked forward to Thanksgiving. For me, it was the worst holiday of the year. At the beginning of the novel, Tangi's father's identity is as much of a mystery as her own mother's choices. When she finally meets him, he explains to her who he is in a way that is heartbreaking. Roselle never told you nothing about me? Never told you how I used to sit for hours just holding you and looking down at your face? It's been some years, but you ought to remember me. Who your mama got you thinking your daddy is? I didn't answer. I couldn't tell him about my mother and her secrets, because I could not explain something I did not understand. She calls her dad Crow until he reveals his name is Clarence Otis, which is like a perfect name. Tangi is the darkest of her mother's children, doesn't have an easy road. She faces intense colorism and scorn from her mother. The family, like many of the black people in Parkersfield, Georgia, are poor. Like her siblings, Tangi's expected to work to help to pay the bills, despite her promise in school. This includes cleaning houses and taking odd jobs. In chapter 30, it was a bitter experience when Tangi arrives at a white woman's house, her social better, to clean for her. The house is an utter sty. The mud on Miss Whitman's feet would have made prints had the carpet not been black already from an accumulation of embedded grime. The front room was in shambles. The house smelled of rot. As I drew closer to Miss Whitman, I noticed she gave off a faint odor that smelled much like Mr. Frank's dog Squat on a bad day. Oh, I can smell that. Ugh. Okay, that's better. Key themes in this book are mental health, the mother-daughter relationship, and also how we reconcile parental abuse and mistakes with our instinctual urge to be devoted to them or to forgive them. Tangi's eldest sister, Mushy, is the only one who is left home. Her return reveals more about Roselle, who swings wildly between love and manipulation tactics, manic happiness, and depression. When Roselle yet again attacks Tangi in chapter 37, Tangi remembers her mother when she was very young with a fever. Her delicate hands had dampened my fevered brow with a cool cloth, stroked my lips with ice chips, and wet my palate with the delicious juice of a peppermint-flavored orange. She had curled on her bed beside me, attentive to my every stir and groan. Holding my small hand in hers, she had said, "You gonna be all right, baby. Mama's here." That was the mother that faded in and out of consciousness. The more I tried to hold on to her, the more my head throbbed. Finally, I had to let her go. The author, Delores Phillips, died in 2014 before she could complete the sequel. This book has a deliciousness rating of 7 out of 10. Food is somewhat important in this story because the lack of it is supposed to reflect the poverty of Tangi and her family. Grits is one of the few foods mentioned regularly in the Quinn household, along with the less mentioned but also unappealing cheese sandwiches, peas and rice, pinto beans, and peanut butter crackers. Says Tarabelle on page 49, "I'm sick and tired of grits. Ought to be something else in the world to eat besides grits all the time." When Roselle is out of the house for a prolonged period, the banquet the kids have reveals their imprisonment. In the absence of our mother, gluttony threatened to be our downfall. Martha Jean, encouraged by Sam, cooked a huge pot of grits and fried over a dozen thick slices of bologna. We were undaunted by the prospect of repercussions. Even as we consumed the last of a loaf of bread, we sampled, savored, and digested the sweets of freedom. Because we, the reader, know this is a luxury for these kids, we smell those thick slices of bologna sizzling in the pan. It's indulgent. For Tangi's 14th birthday, it's mentioned that she has a special treat. We sat outside on the damp steps, huddled together against a chilly wind, eating Johnny cake cookies and discussing our mother's metal box. Of course, I went to go look these up and I thought these would be a brand, but I found that Johnny cake cookies are ambiguous. On some message boards, it's a buttery vanilla oatmeal cookie, and to others, it's a basic cookie made with water, flour, and vanilla flavoring. On page 96, Roselle baking bread for her children is described lushly, with the act of the abusive mother, who is supposed to be a source of sustenance and care, linked to the importance of a mother providing her baby with breast milk. She gathered the ball of dough in her hand. She tapped her chest for emphasis, leaving floury fingerprints across the milk stains. Our mother stood at that rickety old table, kneading guilt that she would later bake and feed to us in bite-sized pieces. At the fair, a yearly segregated event everyone looks forward to, there's mention of cotton candy and hot dogs, although Hambone, an increasingly militant civil rights activist with a predilection for younger girls, points out they've stored away everything that's worth having, from the lemonade to the game prizes. It's junk, things they wouldn't dare give their own kind, things they intentionally hold until Negro night. I'm willing if you scrape the coating off of some of them candy apples, you're gonna find worms and rot. Hot dogs on stale bread, maggots in the onions. Don't let your children eat it. Don't give these crackers another dime. Also, scent plays a major role in this story when the aroma of sausage and eggs brings Martha Jean out of her room to see her sister's betrayal on page 309. Lastly, Tangi is tantalized by the smells of New Year's, which represent the promise of rejuvenation and change. On the stove, a pot of black-eyed peas sent a spray of steam into the air that mingled with the fragrance of collard greens and candied yams. My mouth watered for just a taste, but I knew the meal was meant for tomorrow. So I really hope you guys liked this video and smelled everything I described except for the bad parts. Forget the bad parts, but the good parts. I hope you smelled all that delicious food. And also, I hope you decided to check out Scentbird. Thank you again so much, Scentbird, for the sponsorship. I appreciate it. It smells so good in here. Also, make sure you check out the link to Scentbird below in the description box, as well as the links to these books. Thank you so much for watching.